Hey, welcome to Keight Krafts. I'm Kate. Today I would like to share with you, I think you're neat. Let's get started. So to kick things off, I am taking the How You Been jar and I'm going to stamp this out a couple of times to give myself a really nice crisp image. I'm using my Blackout Ink on 3, nice and dark black ink. I'll give that a second stamp and then we'll move on to the next little bit here. So I've got the How You Been add-on buttons, and we are going to stamp those guys on the inside of the jar. And then that little singleton right there, I'm going to stamp him out a couple of more times as well. So next I'm going to take a couple of Copic colors here. We've got the N2, the N1, and the N0. And I'm just going to create a little bit of shadow around these buttons because we're going to do something a little bit different with these guys here. So I want to make sure that I have a little bit of depth with these, and I'm going in with my darkest and then bringing it out onto my lightest. You know the routine. It's a nice, fun, easy coloring today. Nothing too strenuous and easy to follow along with. As I've said, it's easy. So once I've gone ahead and colored those guys out, I've got this daughter pen here. I would think it was Zig, it said on the side. And I'm just going over the buttonholes with the fatter part of the daughter. And then I've gone ahead on those little singletons and done the same. And then, because I want to be extra, I am taking a black glazed pen by Sakura. And I'm just kind of going around the center. I don't want to go all the way to the edge of the black. I just wanted a little bit in the center. And then I gone ahead and taken some white gel pen to them, I think. Unless that's just shine and I haven't gotten there yet. It's hard to tell on my screen. So what I've got going on here is I've got the C10 marker that I am just bringing in almost like the shelf or whatever this jar is going to be sitting on. And then I'm going to go ahead with that C3 marker and give myself a little bit of shadow around the eyes and on the lip of the jar. And then I'm going to blend that out with the C2. And then I will go over every single little bit there with that C1 just to make sure that I have a decent enough blend that you don't see too many striations in my coloring. And I'll make sure to go around the edges just so that's not completely white. And then I'll come back again in with that C2 just to kind of blend everything out again. So next up, we have got these little eyeballs. Oh, this is where I go in with the gel pen. And it's not a gel pen so much as a white glazed pen. I had come across this in I forget where I got it. I got like a pack of them that were already open. They were on discount. It was from some discount store I go to. And I thought it was clear until I used it and it dried white. And I thought it was fantastic. But this pen right here, this is just my Stardust pen by Sakura. I'm just going around with some scribbles just to give the eyeballs a little bit of interest so they don't look so flat in the jar. So once I've done that, then I will go ahead with these little singletons and go around those too. And then I've gone ahead and taken the window die by Fawn and I've cut it out 4 times. And what I'm doing here is I'm getting rid of the frame bit to the inside of the window because we are going to turn this into like a cupboard shelf, so to speak. You know, like one of those glass window cupboards that you would see. I don't know, my grandmother had some and she kept all of her pretty little china cups in there, like the dainty little teacups and stuff. And that kind of gave me the idea to almost make like one of those shelves in, say, a Vincent Price movie where they've got all the weird bits and bobs sitting on the counter and into the cupboards and stuff. Anyway, that was my idea of thinking here. So I've got ahead and I've taken this scrap piece of acetate and I'm just going to cut this down to size because this is going to be like our glass panel to our door. This door isn't going to function at all, or the little window here isn't going to function at all. It's just going to be like a standalone shelf on the wall displaying a jar of weird looking eyeballs, so to speak. So once I've cut this down to a proper size and I'm satisfied with my handiwork, I'm going to bring out some tape and we are going to tape this guy down. Now I'm sorry this is a little bit off screen. I was trying to keep it in frame, but I was kind of excited about this idea. Initially I wanted to mask off the centers of the buttons and the little stitching around them, but that proved to be way too involved and way too tedious, and I got really discouraged, and I really, really, really needed to get this idea out of my head. So I decided to go with that daughter instead, and that's what we got. I mean, you could make this a shaker card as well, with stuff in the glass, or stuff in like the glass jar, or stuff in the cupboard, so to speak, but I just kind of wanted to keep this simple. So once I've gone ahead and I've glued down my acetate sheet, I'm going to go in with some of my Barely Art glue, and I'm going to go around the edge of the window, and then we are going to adhere this to the piece with the acetate, and then I'll repeat the same process for the other layers that we have here. So this way I have a little bit of depth to this, so when you're looking at the card itself, it looks like the jar of eyeballs is sitting on the shelf on the inside of this little cupboard here. So I'll make sure to give that a good mash down, and then we'll set a brick on it. And next up we are going to do our bit of cardstock here. Now I've got some craft cardstock, and I use the Woodgrain stitched background die, or backdrop die by Fawn. And I'm going in with, I believe this is Walnut around the edges. Now I want to make sure that this is pretty heavy as I'm going through it. And then I'll come in back with some black, some of the Soot color I think it was that I grabbed. So once I'm satisfied with that walnut, we are just going to touch around the edges, just kind of flicking that inward just to darken it up and give it a little more interest with the two colors. And then next we are going to take the pearlescent fine tech watercolors, and we are going to take the hazelnut one, and I'm going to load that up with a little bit of water, and then we're going to take our little fine brush and swoosh it around, and then we're just going to give our brush a little bit of tap so we can get some fat splatter. And then once I've had enough of that, we are going to put this guy down, and then I'm just going to use a tapping with another instrument here. Just a sec. I find that that gives you just a smaller amount of splatter, I think. I don't know, I know I see Jessica Squirrel do this quite a bit in her videos where she taps her paintbrush on something else, so I thought I'd try it. So next up we have the sentiment, and this is the I Think You're Neat. And I believe this comes from the Monster Mash one. That was the smaller set. Not a mini set, not a 4x6, but what is that? The 3x2? 3x4? I don't know. It's the medium-sized stamp set with the little monsters in it, and I thought this sentiment with it would be kind of cute because there's a bunch of eyeballs in a cupboard, and I think you're neat. So, because I think you're neat, we are going to give this a generous helping of the fine white wow embossing powder. I've grown to love embossing powder now that I have found that they have a finer grain of embossing powder, because I just had no luck with the larger one. So I'm going to dust around and make sure that I've got that all cleaned off, and we are going to hit it with the heat tool. I'll hit it from the back, hit it from the front, make sure that everything is nice and melty, and just look at that. I think you're neat. I think that is such a cute little saying, especially with the eyeballs. I know, it's just too much. So I'm going to make sure that this little extra panel of black cardstock that I have will fit the background, so I don't have to cut another slice. So as you can see here, the bottom of the jar kind of matches up with the dark cardstock and gives it the illusion that the jar is a little more three-dimensional. So I'm going to line that up in between and make sure that's all nice and mashed down. And then once I'm happy with how much I've mashed it down, we're going to line everything up to inspect the handiwork and make sure that it is positioned where it is that it needs to be. So once I'm happy with the look, I'll go ahead and I will add a little bit of the Barely Arts glue to the top and the bottom. I mean, I probably shouldn't have done this way. I should have went around the edges on the actual card panel itself, but I wasn't sure how much real estate I had to deal with, so I just kind of poked in the little nozzle and gave just a tiny little dribble on the side, and then I'll mash that down. So once I'm happy with all of that, we are going to move on to putting all of the pieces of the puzzle together. So my panel is dry. Now I'm going to line this all up and try to figure out how it is that I want to put this together. But then I remembered the little singletons that I had here, and I fussed with these quite a bit trying to figure out which way I wanted them. I hadn't quite figured out at this point where I wanted to put them, but then I thought, you know what, maybe on top of the cupboard itself might be kind of neat, because this is a nonsensical card. I mean, unless you're an absolute weirdo and keeps a bottle or a jar of eyeballs in the cupboard. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing. All I know is that I wanted to turn these buttons into eyeballs. Yeah, and I thought instead of adding like little embellishments, which I didn't have any eyeballs, although I do have googly eyes, but I thought the googly eyes would kind of detract from the jar of eyes anyway. So, I mean, you could very well just glue a bunch of googly eyes inside the jar and put the jar inside the cupboard and maybe add a little handle for a knob or something like that, or even have it open. Create some sort of hinge where, you know, this kind of opens and you can touch the jar of eyeballs inside the cupboard. I mean, if you wanted to. But we didn't do it that way. I'm just sitting here thinking about a jar of eyeballs in the cupboard and how gross and squishy it would be to stick my finger in the jar, because, yeah, that's what happens sometimes in my noggin. So I've added some glue onto that. Well, I've added some score tape onto that to make sure that I have some good coverage with glue. And then I'm going to line this up on my grid mat, stand above my project, and kind of eyeball where this needs to go, if you know what I mean. So I'll give that a good mash down, and once I'm happy with that, we are going to come back in with our heat embossed sentiment, and we are going to pull out the Fiskars guillotine trimmer, and we are going to give this a nice hairline trim. Just right up close to that lettering, and that way you've got just a little bit of a black border. I'm going to measure it, see where I need to cut, and then I'm going to pull out some scissors, and I'm just going to cut almost right up to the sentiment itself, and then I'll just center that up, and then I'll glue that on. You could glue it underneath, but I thought gluing it on top here kind of made everything look a little bit more cohesive. So once I'm done that, I will make sure everything is lined up the way I like it, give it a little tap, and my card is complete. So here you have the finished card. All it needs is a card base, and there you go. So if you think I've earned it, smash that like button, or maybe hit that subscribe button. You never know what I come up with next. And as always, thanks for hanging out with me today. Take care.